Hi guys, today I'm going to be talking about the endocrine system. So, the endocrine system is a really big topic. There's no way I can cover everything right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a brief introduction on how the system works. And I'll go into how particular hormones work in later videos. Now, the way I like to think about the endocrine system is think of it as the body's news network. Now, bear with me as I go a little bit off topic. What I want to do is make a point that's going to use a very powerful metaphor to help you understand the endocrine system. As I said, the endocrine system is like the body's news network. So why do we even need news? Why can't I just ignore it? It's boring, it doesn't really help me. Why do I need news? Well, think of good news. What you need is actual news, good news. And what I think of as good news is information that is going to change your life. Information that is actually a good picture of what's going on in the world around you. It's not necessarily positive, but it actually represents what's going on. Bad news is information that is not an actual picture of what's going on. It might be wonderful. Oh my goodness, gas is going to be $1 a gallon tomorrow, but it's not reality. That is what I like to call bad news. So, to give you an example of how important good news is, let's go back through history. So, we are in London, July 15th, 1665. And as you can see, looking around here, we're having thousands of people who are going to die this week, unfortunately. The Black Death is going all over the place. It's a very horrible way to die. So, according to the news, it seems like all these cats and dogs that we're seeing everywhere is what's causing the Black Death. The solution seems very obvious. We got all these cats and dogs that are spreading the Black Death. We need to get rid of the cats and dogs. And, oh my goodness, I'm right here with animal control, and they just told me that the mayor is telling them they're going to kill all the cats and dogs in the city. And that's going to come up to, what's that now? 40,000 dogs and 200,000 cats. Man, they're going to be very busy upcoming months. So let's check in with them in a few months and see how that plays out. It is now September 19th, 1665. All 40,000 dogs and all 200,000 cats. And unfortunately, it looks like they weren't the ones carrying the disease. It appears that mice with fleas were the ones carrying the disease. And since cats and dogs are no longer around, their numbers have exploded. And now, the number of Black Death cases have also exploded. This week, it looks like 7,000 people are going to die. Like, why? Because the news got it wrong. People made decisions that made all the sense in the world, but their choices were based off a lie. Their choices were based off of bad news. Well, in the body, the same thing happens when the endocrine system gets the news wrong. The only difference is, instead of people in towns and villages and governments making the choices, it's cells, tissues, organs, and organ systems that are making these awful choices. Alright, so let's see if I can't get this remote to work. Listen up, liver cells. It's your job to keep the body alive as long as you can. Extra, extra, read all about it. Blood sugar dangerously low, impending brain damage and death. Liver cell number 1. Quick! Release as much glucose as you can into the bloodstream. Liver cell number 2. It isn't enough. Liver cell number 1. Break down all available protein and create more sugar. Liver cell number 2. But we'll die if the blood gets too acidic. Liver cell number 1. The brain is actively dying, and you're worried about the blood might get too acidic? Are you crazy? Get back to work and create more sugar. I think you get the idea. Alright, so how do we regulate our hormones, or for the sake of example, our news? Overwhelmingly through negative feedback. What is that, and how does that work? Think about your heat pump at home. So we want our house temperature to stay between 70 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So as long as the temperature stays between these two numbers, I don't care what it is. But if the temperature gets outside of these two numbers, I'm going to think that's a negative thing. That's too hot, that's too cold, and I'm going to spend my hard-earned money to resist that change. So once the temperature passes 75 degrees Fahrenheit, my AC is going to kick in. And the higher my house temperature gets above 75, the harder that air conditioner is going to work to cool down the house until my AC is working as hard as it possibly can to cool my house down. So what happens on this side of the spectrum? If my house temperature gets below 70 degrees, my heat's going to kick in. And the lower my house temperature goes below 70, the harder my heat's going to work to heat my house up so I don't freeze to death. The same thing is going to work with my blood sugar. Now, this is an oversimplification, but good enough. When your blood sugar is above 100, we don't want our blood sugar that high. We're going to release insulin, and the higher that blood sugar goes, the more insulin I'm going to produce, and the harder my body's going to work to drag the blood sugar back down to between 70 and 100 milligrams per deciliter. What happens when my blood sugar gets too low? Well, I'm going to release glucagon. And the lower my blood sugar goes, the more glucagon I'm going to produce, and the harder my body is going to work to raise that blood sugar back up and keep it between 100 and 70 milligrams per deciliter. Overall, I don't really care too much what my blood sugar is, as long as it's between 100 and 70 milligrams per deciliter. Now, this example right here was looking at the internal environment. We produce insulin and glucagon based off of what the blood sugar was. And there are many other hormones that do the same sort of idea. And so this is another strategy we use to regulate our hormones. And so what happens is the brain is controlling the secretion of T4 from your thyroid using a trophic hormone. So if T4 is in this Goldilocks zone, we're not going to really do too much. Now, unfortunately for your endocrinologist, you might want to plug your ears here. But what will happen is when the T4 goes too high, we stop producing TSH. When the T4 goes too low, we start producing TSH. And that's going to tell the thyroid, get to work, we need more thyroxine. And that's going to raise that thyroxine level up and keep it within this Goldilocks zone. When we stop producing it, slowly but surely it's going to break down and it's going to drop the thyroxine level, that T4, back to within that Goldilocks zone. The nervous system will actually tell a gland directly to produce its hormone. An example, the hypothalamus will actually send a nerve signal down to the pituitary gland and cause the posterior pituitary gland to release the antidiuretic hormones, direct nerve stimulation. Now, last but not least, we can actually use positive feedback. And so, unlike negative feedback, where we're trying not to get out of this Goldilocks zone, right? Whether it be the temperature of our house or blood sugar or how much TSH or how much T4 we want, positive feedback actually enhances the change. For example, you give birth. You don't want a few contractions and stop. You want more and more contractions until this baby comes out. Well, how does the uterus know to do more and more contractions? Oxytocin. And so as the contractions go up, your oxytocin goes up, which triggers you to have more and more contractions. And it stops when you give birth. Very few hormones work that way. All right, guys, I look forward to seeing my upcoming videos about the various hormones in the endocrine system. See you then.